We're lost in a strange new world, bewildered, and picking up random items. That means we either walked into CVS in a fugue state again, or we're playing Flashback on this episode of Doki Doki Game Club. Game Club. Game Club. Game Club. Hello and welcome to Doki Doki Game Club, a retro video game podcast. I am your host, Brandon Fincher, and I am joined today by my Holocube Holden hombres, Frank Martin.
Beep boop.
Brian Grogan.
Yeah.
And Mr. Joseph Luster.
Hey, I got nothing good for that.
On Doki Doki Game Club, we each take a turn choosing a particular title from video game history, and we announce the selection online so everyone can play along at home. From there, we have 2 weeks to spend with the title, at which point we reconvene to dig into the ins and outs of the selection. Today's pick was made by myself, and that title is Flashback, The Quest for Identity for the Sega Genesis. Flashback, released as Flashback, The Quest for Identity in the United States, is a 1992 science fiction cinematic platform game developed by Delphine Software of France and published by US Gold in the United States and Europe and Sunsoft in Japan. All right, my dudes, my cyberpunks.
Yeah.
Speaking of cyberpunk, I thought we might actually kick this episode off by addressing a new feature that we have implemented under the Doki Doki Game Club Twitter account, which is the weekly poll. And that's something with the release of every new episode title. Leading up to the release of the episode, we are coming up with a question pertaining to the game and giving people the opportunity to vote on the question throughout the week. Just a simple poll. And so the poll that I happened to write this week, since it was about Flashback, is Flashback cyberpunk?
Ooh.
Now, I know what 100% of our voters, of our Twitter followers and voters went with, but, well, let's go ahead and announce that, and then I'll get your personal opinions.
Yeah.
So, everyone that voted, of which there were many, decided that Flashback is a cyberpunk game. I've got my own thoughts on that, but I'd like to know your thoughts. So maybe if you guys want to give me a little rundown. How about you, Joseph? What are your thoughts? Cyberpunk or not?
I don't consider this cyberpunk really. To me, it's just kind of like a sci-fi like yarn, like if anything, maybe you could say like, I don't know, is neo-noir the same thing? It's not really a noir though. It's like, I don't know. I don't think it falls into that category because it doesn't really like, I don't know. To me, it's just aliens and like a little bit of like, like something you would see in a standard sci-fi film.
Yeah.
Right.
For the most part. Other than the cars and some of the designs, I don't see cyberpunk at all.
It's interesting you mentioned the aliens because in my opinion, and I believe I've had this conversation with Brian before, aliens are not cyberpunk.
I agree.
Unless they're smoking like cyber cigarettes.
Well, it's true. I suppose they could be cyberpunk in their own context. Yeah. But when you incorporate Earthlings in with some sort of alien race, for me, it tends to be an element that sort of pulls cyberpunk away. And Brian, I don't know if you recall this conversation, but I think when you first discovered Altered Carbon, which hopefully some of our listeners have, if nothing else, watched the fun Netflix series, but there's a great book. There is an element of extraterrestrial in the Takeshi Kovacs trilogy that the Altered Carbon comes from. But when Brian and I originally were talking about it, I was saying that of all cyberpunk fiction, that I thought that Altered Carbon was probably my favorite book from that sort of area. And, it's got the aliens in there. So I don't know. I guess I am kind of divided because there are some things in Flashback that are definitely cyberpunk-y.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got this coat of paint on it that is, it's rusty and gritty.
Well, specifically, one area of the entire game to me is the most cyberpunky, which we can get to later. But there's one portion of the game that really fits that.
I think it's kind of like the Fifth Element kind of way to look at cyberpunk, where it's like neo future, but has too much of the extraterrestrial stuff kind of thing going on.
Yeah, it seems like, and that's I think Altered Carbon is probably on the edge of this, but it's like post cyberpunk.
Yeah, no, that's a good a good perspective to have, especially if, like most people, you define the aesthetics of cyberpunk with the Blade Runner movie, right?
Yeah.
Because that has a particular look, and it is gritty and grimy from top to bottom. With contrast of neon in it, and you have the scene in Flashback that Joseph mentioned. I guess I resist going into detail about that yet, but I don't know. I just kind of thought that was interesting that most people that voted, 100% of people that voted went with that it was cyberpunk, and
Well, there's definitely those cop enemies that are very cyberpunk.
Sure.
Yeah, they have those jetpacks and those goggles and stuff like that. So that's very cyberpunk, but. Yeah.
Well, it's actually funny, and I don't want to get too much into, other media, but Neuromancer ends with an extraterrestrial bent.
Oh, really? I never read it, so I don't know.
Yeah, well, spoiler, but there's an extraterrestrial, just mentioned. It kind of like cyberpunk's transitions into, I guess logically into some sort of extraterrestrial
sci-fi twist.
Man, it's been a while since I've experienced Neuromancer.
Well, now it's been spoiled for you, so you don't have to experience it.
Yeah,
no. Huh. Yeah, that's hey, there you go. Then maybe I'm the one in the wrong here, and the alien angle is a valid.
I think if you swap out the aliens for any kind of cyborg or android, then I'm like, yeah, okay, now it's cyberpunk.
Oh yeah, yeah. Can you imagine that? Definitely there would have been no question of it at that point.
Yeah, but the thing is this
Snatcher, for instance.
I don't know if we're gonna go too deep into story right now, but it like you said, if you just change one element of the whole thing, it would be definitely cyberpunk just by changing one background element of the whole thing. And it has that neon noir, like you said, it's got that mystery and finding deja vu style, and I don't know.
I think we should go with what Brian said, because if you put post before anything, then you're right. So just call it post cyberpunk.
Right.
You can get away with a lot of things.
Well, here's the thing, because I think it draws elements from this. Was Total Recall cyberpunk?
Man,
I was thinking Total Recall specifically
that's tough, right?
because of some of the sections of the game reminded me of Total Recall. So
definitely. I think it pulls from a bunch of I guess we'll get into this, like Total Recall, Running Man, They Live.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Snatcher.
Sure.
Which borrows from a bunch of stuff. It's fairly derivative.
Obviously.
Yeah.
But I guess for people to get on the devil's advocate side of the Twitter poll, at face value, if you don't know the story very much, it is a cyberpunk looking game. You see this gritty city, this kind of jacket, and these weird enemies.
Yeah, you know what? Let's scrap it all. The jacket really does it. I think.
Well,
the shoes
I think that
too.
gives us an opportunity, I think, to transition into everyone's personal experience with this, and maybe we can kind of keep doing that through the lens of cyberpunk. But I'm interested in where everyone was with this game before we decided to make an episode out of it. Let's maybe go with Frank.
Yeah. For me, I had played it maybe a few times, the SNES version of it, through ROMs when they first started emerging in the early 2000s. I remember having a big list of it and going through, okay, this is kind of cool. I like the aesthetics of it, but it plays so slow, and I never played Prince of Persia and all those type of games, so I didn't really enjoy it. I was more into tighter feeling games, so I always played maybe 10-15 minutes into the jungle level and just been like, man, never mind.
Well, what about Another World, aka?
Well, same thing with Another World. I played it and then I went, it's not for me. I don't like these controls and stuff. I like the aesthetics, and I like what it pushed for the time. Like it's really interesting to see this kind of cel shaded looking animation and stuff like that for the time. But it for me, it always was like this. I get it. And it's very European. It's very French.
For sure.
Yeah. And then I go, okay, it's cool, but I don't want to play it. And I never played it. So when you mentioned to play it, I was like, okay, I'll give it a time of day. And spoilers, I didn't finish it. But I don't know. It's not my type of game, but yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that a bit more later.
But my background is I did know of it. I did play it maybe once or twice before, but not to the extent that I did play it this time.
Okay. Well, how about you, Brian? How about you got?
I'll start with Out of This World. I played the heck out of that as a kid, and like even subsequently, like I liked it and really loved it. I think my friend rented Flashback, and he was very excited about it. I don't know if I played it much, like when it came out. I might have just given a little bit, but I very distinctly remember the first two levels. Just playing that, and I thought I was impressed back in the day.
Yeah.
When I tried it again, I think around circa the year 2000, I remember playing it and then eventually getting bored of it.
Okay.
Getting pretty far, but I didn't finish it then.
Well, Joseph, that leaves you. Did you play this game before we decided to make this episode?
Well, first, just to jump on something Frank said that he made me think about. Like, I think even more so than cinema, like games, you can really tell where they were made, which is kind of funny to me.
Yeah.
Like you said, this is a very French game, very European game.
Yeah.
And when I was growing up, Brian, I rented or played Out of This World a lot, and for some reason, that game was really intriguing to me. It seemed kind of dangerous, maybe because it was 1991, but there was something sinister about it to me. And it might have been the presentation, or it might have just been the fact that it was a lot more of a running for your life.
Oh, yes.
Scenarios.
I was going to say, you mentioned danger, and I don't want to make this too much about Out of This World, but I too loved that game as a kid. And if you'll recall, past the opening cutscene, which for a cartridge game at the time was incredible, of Out of This World. But you wake up in a strange pool in an alien planet, and if you don't move up out of that water immediately, you will die at the very beginning of the game.
Gripped.
It's definitely not. This is it's definitely not like a power trip kind of game where you go in to feel powerful.
Oh no, exactly. And it's like playing Super Mario Brothers as a kid and going, "What is this mushroom? Oh God, I'm dead."
Yeah.
So yeah. So that's a very different game, because then I played Flashback, and it looked to me a little bit like Out of This World, not entirely, because it was even though it was just a year later or so.
Yeah.
Well,
Out of This World came out in
91.
91, yeah.
And then
and
this was 92, and I thought basically my experience with Flashback is I played it a bunch. But as far as I was concerned, that was like a one-room game. Because I was in these jungle areas, and then I would climb down a screen, climb up a screen, go left and right, I'd be like, well, I don't know what to do. And then I would just turn it off or take it back to Blockbuster.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny to me to hear you guys, especially Brian, mention, you kind of got fairly far into it. I mean, granted, if had I tried to really give it a thorough shake in 2000, I probably would have gotten much further. But, as a kid, when this came out, I have some really strong memories of it. And I remember I had a friend, like a neighborhood pal, who had the Genesis around this time. And I had, I'd gotten the Super Nintendo instead. And I remember playing Flashback at his place. There's like a handful of games that I can think of that just completely encapsulate the feel of the Genesis aesthetic to me.
Yeah.
And it's Flashback, believe it or not. It's Jurassic Park. The Genesis Jurassic Park game.
Oh yeah.
And X-Men.
I played that so much, by the way, the Genesis Jurassic Park.
Oh man, it's good. Or at least it was back then.
Yeah.
But then the X-Men game, and all of them have that sort of same that Genesis muted color palette, trying to be edgy. But yeah, so I don't know if he had it or we rented it. My memory is foggy on that detail, but I mean, we played it quite a bit, and I have when I played it this time, and we'll talk about it as we kind of cover some of the areas in the game. I had no recollection of getting anywhere past this jungle stage.
You probably didn't.
And I probably didn't. Yeah. And I play it now and go, well, geez, man, it's weird.
And like, it's such a small part of the game.
Yeah, I know, and it took such a long time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very intimidating, and it doesn't sell the game like as a first time player. If you're into cyberpunk or if you're into sci-fi stuff and you're into this jungle, I always found it very ugly. Like it never grabbed me. I was like, I never wanted to play more. I'm like, it's a jungle first level. I really don't care. It's not Contra. Like, get out of here.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing, right? Like if the box art presents the game in a distinctly gritty sci-fi, what would you just call it, sort of aesthetic.
Yeah.
It's a really strange choice to start the game off more or less like on this jungle planet.
And just to mention the cover art. The cover art is great. It's like a face zoomed in.
Well, which one though?
I'm talking about the one that I think it's the US one. It's kind of like a face and it's all blue and there's like a laser going into his forehead.
If I'm not mistaken, that's actually the European box art. Yeah.
Oh, wait, let me see.
Yeah, the US box art.
That's the original Amiga cover art.
That's the original Amiga one.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah. Anyways, if you can look up that Amiga one, that one is prime.
It's very cool.
It's good. Yeah. Let me actually. I'm just gonna, out of curiosity, check out the Genesis one while you guys talk. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, so we've talked about Out of This World. I think it's safe to say we all have pretty fond memories of that. How about? So I've got kind of a list here of other games that fall into this strangely distinct genre, a subgenre, I guess we'll call it, of cinematic platformers. And as a kid, you don't think about these things, right? Like I don't know. I didn't think about genre as a kid growing up playing Flashback. I wasn't like, oh, okay, well, this is kind of like Out of This World, and this is kind of like, whatever else. But as an adult and kind of through adult eyes with access to the internet, you're able to sort of populate a list of stuff that undoubtedly and unarguably falls into this that sort of similar. Heavily story-driven platformer.
It's like puzzle platformer almost. Like I know it's cinematic.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But it's very puzzle focused.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, cinematic platformer has a nice. Say again, Brian. I'm sorry.
It starts out very puzzle focused.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I have played, I guess, most of the other ones on this list here. The earliest example of this seems to be a title called Weird Dreams. Do you guys have any familiarity with that?
No.
Yeah, when I was doing some research, I was like, oh, okay, this is definitely nothing I've heard of before. And I have to assume it didn't hit the beats in the same way that Prince of Persia from 1989 did, which this game I would say probably owes quite a bit to. Same with Out of This World, where they use the rotoscope animation.
Yeah.
I'd love to see a sort of making of this game. There's a lot of info online about Prince of Persia, and we've talked about Prince of Persia on the show before, especially with...
Impossible
Mission. With Impossible Mission, but I was also thinking of our Moon Crystal episode.
Yeah.
With the overly animated, platformer
grabbing on ledges.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this game's got a lot of that. There's ledge grabbing. There is these involved animated turnabouts. Crouching and rolling,
bad
and
controls.
All these things. Well, definitely bad controls. Yeah. But so I'm just going to list off a few of these here. Maybe you guys can tell me if you have any other experience with them. Blackthorn.
Oh,
yeah.
Can I give you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I? Can you try guess the two words that got me to rent Blackthorn? It's a name.
I'm gonna go with Jim Lee.
Yes, of course. Have Jim Lee draw
Yeah.
a cover for anything in the early '90s, and I'm there.
Yes, please.
Too bad the
for
game
sure.
was so bad.
But see, really,
I don't remember it that well. It was like Flashback to me. I played the first area, and I was like, cool.
Well, yeah, it's just the same thing. To be fair, when you first mentioned Flashback, I thought of Blackthorn because I was picturing the guy with the shotgun, and you got to go you got to turn your sideways to avoid bullets. Anyways.
Well, yeah. So you do the lean back against the wall in Blackthorn, and Blackthorn is a game that is definitely a little more on the side of action combat than Flashback is, and I think it succeeds because of that.
To me, I would about to say it's his detriment because it's so slow. It doesn't feel good to play, but I don't know.
But you're saying Blackthorn?
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. I mean, I definitely the character movement as you sort of like do this and intentional plotting through the level. Yeah, it is slow in that regard, but I feel like the gunplay. It's true. Yeah, muscle mass will definitely slow you down.
Sure.
So this cinematic platformer tradition like kind of continued on through the 90s quite a bit, and one of the standout titles that kind of caught my attention was something I've only played a little bit of, but I would like to play a bit more of, and that's Heart of Darkness for the PlayStation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, do you guys have any familiarity with that?
No.
Yeah.
Nope.
Not at all.
You should take a look at it. I mean, it's aged surprisingly well. I actually gave it a shot recently because I remember seeing the box art for it before, but I'd never got around to playing it, and the aesthetics of the game are really cool. Like tons of pre-rendered backgrounds in a very kind of distinctly PlayStation style, and it's a little boy who it's tough to determine if like it's his imagination that's running wild, and he's sort of like dealing with these shadow characters in a sort of Kingdom Hearts, the black inky blob, Ico or that sort of thing. Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and the cover looks very familiar. I'm sure I've seen it at like video stores when I was renting games.
Yeah. I was thinking I can definitely remember like looking at it at like a Electronics Boutique shelf.
Yeah.
Back then.
It's a double CD.
Oddworld. It is a double CD.
Yeah.
Yep, I remember it being in the kind of the fat case.
Yeah.
Oddworld, Abe's Odyssey. I know that was a pretty popular one.
It's still popular now. Yeah.
Yeah. They have I guess remade it.
Yeah, I think it's like a soft reboot kind of.
Yeah. I this wasn't on the list when I looked it up, but I had the thought that Limbo would kind of be a modern equivalent to this genre. Do you guys agree, disagree with that?
I'm fine with that, actually. Yeah. Why not?
But it's not really retro. What is that called? Scoping? Rotoscoping. Yeah.
Neither is Blackthorn.
Yeah.
I mean, neither is Weird Dreams.
I don't know.
Yeah, so I don't know that the rotoscoping necessarily, but I think it's the sort of puzzle platformer
animation
aspect of it. Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah. And then I had kind of made a note here off to the side that I felt that the Tomb Raider games were sort of once game developers figured out how to make things in 3D. I mean, it's definitely a puzzle platformer.
Sure.
And fairly cinematic, and it's
and like Tomb Raider does a lot to Prince of Persia in general. So
yeah,
I'd be down. I'm fine with that. Like that was for sure trying to be like a cinematic platformer.
Yeah. All right. Well, unless you guys got anything else you want to add about the history of the game, I'd say it's time for the Back of the Box. Flashback, the quest for identity. The CD-ROM game in a cartridge. Planet Titan. Brave mutants, robots, antimatter fields, and the primitive inhabitants as you find your way through the jungle. New Washington. First, recover your memory. Then, go undercover to earn money. Finally, buy a false ID if you want to sneak back on Earth. Death Tower. Climb the 8 floors of the Death Tower Labyrinth, avoid the deadly replicants, and win a free ticket to Earth. Earth. Big trouble. The authorities have discovered your false ID and send robot cops to capture you. Paradise Club. You discover the aliens' plans, but somehow end up being captured and mysteriously transported through space. Planet Morphs. You materialized on their home planet. Now all you have to do is destroy the morphs and live to tell about it. Get the whole story. 14-page flashback comic book from Marvel Comics inside. Okay, so there you have the rather strange rundown of each and every stage in the game, courtesy of the Back of the Box.
Very, very strange.
Yeah, right? Okay, so what is the summary of Flashback? So you didn't get any indication, really, based on the back of the box, what this game was. Hopefully the images attached to the box clarified that. But in case it wasn't clear, I'd say you take the original Prince of Persia style, which we've mentioned so far, of that sort of 2D platforming with environmental puzzles and rotoscope animation. You give it a gun and a gritty coat of sci-fi paint, and that's basically Flashback. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
They should have just put that on the back of the box.
They should have, right? Yeah.
Did you guys see any scans of that Marvel comic that they talk about?
I was going to ask that. So that actually, that's a good segue. So there's a comic book that was sent with this game. I had no recollection of having read it as a kid when we played the game, which leads me to believe that we probably rented it.
Did Jim Lee do it?
It says Marvel. I don't think Jim Lee did it. But so it came with this thorough breakdown of the history, or like the story leading up to, and maybe even including the game itself. So basically like an explanation of a Flashback. And I think that's really strange to me that they did that, because like you have this stage by stage breakdown that I went over on the back of the box. You have a game that came with a comic that tells you in no uncertain terms that it provides an explanation of the game. And I really can't help but think that the reason behind that is how poorly conveyed the plot of this game is. And like there are a couple of little cutscenes, and you can sort of piece together, but there's, man, like the occasional NPC interaction.
Well,
like
I mean, and especially like the weird variety of NPCs. Like all of a sudden you run into like the old man from the box art of Phalanx on Super NES.
Yeah, for no reason. God, that might be like the pinnacle of the weirdness in this game.
Yeah.
So let's just explain that for people listening. So this game opens up on the jungle planet of Titan. You're playing this character. You don't know your name, but the character, we're going to call him Conrad because that's eventually revealed to be his name.
We're going to just guess and call him Conrad.
Yeah. So Conrad wakes up on the jungle planet of Titan with a holocube next to him. It's the closest thing next to him. And he reaches his hand out and grabs it as he's sort of trying to get his footing and gets stood up from being knocked unconscious via hover cycle accident. Right? Is that is fair to say that's what's going on?
That's always how it goes.
Yeah, the game opens up and Conrad's being pursued by space police, I guess. He crash lands on Titan, is knocked unconscious, wakes up, and has this holocube, and the holocube is him. And it's him explaining to himself that you're on the run or something. I'm not quite sure what the future or past Conrad was trying to explain to present Conrad.
It was all like Total Recall, where it's like, hey, I'm you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to start leaving myself those kind of video messages, by the way.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. So Conrad is sent on a quest for identity.
That's a great thing. Like, it's set up like, oh, it's going to take, like, the end, he'll finally get his identity back.
Yeah.
And,
he gets it in the first. He
It's
gets
like-
it in the first act.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, basically.
the first holocube message is, "Hi, I'm Conrad B. Whoever."
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm you, and this is where we're at with that. So you make your way through the jungle planet of Titan. You get to a point, and there is a strange old codger sitting next to a huge pit.
The only human in this area? Can
For
we
sure.
say that?
The only human in the area.
The old pit watcher.
The professor as
He's
well.
like Judd Crandall.
Oh, yeah.
What was the other one, Brian?
The professor that was wounded or whatever is.
Oh, that's
with
true.
The teleporter.
Yep. But otherwise, it's
but he
mostly
doesn't live
populated by
there.
mutants.
Yeah, he doesn't live there. He was on, like, doing research or something, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
not from there. And that's the thing. What's with the mutants? Like, who? Those weren't explained either.
And like,
They're
why are they mutants? Like, why
Yeah.
are they not aliens from Titan? Yeah, I don't know. It's, like I said, poorly conveyed. Anyhow, this is taking too long to get to the point that the old guy offers you a hover belt, or I'm sorry, an anti-gravity belt.
Anti-gravity, yeah.
Yeah, let's get that right. So that you can fall into a pit
And go to
And
stage
not
2.
die.
and end back up on Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In New Washington,
Okay.
to be specific.
in
New
New
Washington.
Washington
New
specifically.
Washington,
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not, I wasn't.
You
real
think there's a
sure what was-
warp hole or something below there?
Well, no,
or-
no, no. New Washington was on Titan. It was you go to the.
Is it beneath the surface?
I think it was at the surface. I think it was like it seems like a reverse like Jetsons and
Oh,
Flintstones.
okay.
It's like a reverse Jetsons and Flintstones where the Flintstones were up above and the Jetsons were down below.
Huh.
So
I don't
okay.
know what it's supposed to be, but yeah.
So that New Washington is underneath the jungle.
yeah,
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
What we're trying to say
Okay.
is the story is very poorly conveyed.
It is poorly conveyed. Yeah, it's a steaming hot mess.
Or maybe it's one of those things where the tunnel actually goes through the whole planet and you're actually on the other side of it.
Oh, okay. Like dig a hole to China kind of.
Dig a hole to China thing, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. So needless to say, it's a hot mess. The game has you playing Conrad. You hop from location to location as laid out in the back of the box, and you uncover the They Live reference that Brian made earlier. That aliens are amongst us, and Conrad. Spoiler alert! But Conrad's college thesis, I guess.
Yeah, I guess his final
was-
project.
His final project was to develop Google Glass that enabled the viewer to determine the density level of things.
Yeah, at a microscope level, yeah.
Yeah, and so they're able to determine the density level of things, determined that there were aliens that were capable of morphing into anything they want, and they look like humans, and they live amongst us, and they have infiltrated the police force, and yeah, so it definitely becomes They Live, but there's no Roddy Piper or
No.
Keith David fight
Sadly.
in the alleyway.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
They could have a Conrad and Ian fight, but
Yeah.
it never happened.
Right. And there wasn't any like he didn't ever use the glasses ever again.
Never.
Like, he wasn't
No.
like
Never.
singling people out.
Yeah, it was
for
part of his
all-
memory.
For
Right,
all we
just
know,
dropped.
we're murdering human
Yeah.
beings.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they're pursuing
cops,
him for,
yeah.
for no reason really. So yeah, I mean, and if they are cops, then they're not really people anyhow. But so we've got this ridiculous story, right? We got this crazy zany story that if this were a movie, I would have loved it. Like a combination
Yeah.
of all the things Brian mentioned, Running Man and Total
Total
Recall,
Recall,
and,
yeah.
and They Live. Man, that sounds like a match.
It's like
made
my
in
dream
heaven.
movie.
Exactly. But this game does not succeed in explaining that to you. And unfortunately, the gameplay itself takes away anything fun about the plot.
Oh God, yeah.
So maybe somebody give me a rundown on the controls of this game.
Not it.
Not it. Not all at once.
It has like kind of a state, like you can either have your gun out or you can have your gun and holstered, and depending whether it's like out or not, like your movements completely change.
Yeah.
Completely.
And it seems like like we're really used to games where you have like this pixel perfect, you can kind of like nudge forward.
Yeah.
It seems like you had like these like you could only be in this spot and then an inch over on this spot and an inch over on
Yeah.
this spot.
Well, there's like a huge momentum to movement in this
Yeah.
game too, which they used as an attempt, I have to assume, to be realistic. I mean, like it takes a while to get the
Right.
body moving, and
Yeah.
but boy, yeah. And Brian, you mentioned the drawing the gun and putting the gun away, and I honestly feel that is like the biggest offender of this game in terms of mechanics, is that I've never seen a movie, or I've never held a gun and felt the inclination to like inch forward, like inch. It's so weird. And it's like, he draws the gun and then it's like, that's it. Like, and it's like he's leaning back against the wall, much like the aforementioned Blackthorn. But there's no
in
like
my-
mechanic to it.
it might be a throwback to the select screen where you are kind of James
So
Bond.
let me get this right.
or-
Let me get this right, Frank. So you think so your theory currently is that they originally designed the screen before they did anything else in the game?
Like, man, this
And they were
screen kicks ass.
man, yeah, we've got to really put that in the game as much as possible.
Exactly. No,
You are our port to the French mind. So we need you to get to the bottom of this.
what happened is that the graphic designer drew the thing, threw it on the director's desk. He said, "I love it. Let's build a whole game around it." And that's it.
And that's it. All right.
Little
Those
insight
French
for
people,
everyone.
they don't need much. The French people don't need much. They just do it.
Yeah. I will say, much like Prince of Persia or Out of This World, there is a certain satisfaction to some of the level design as it pertains to character animation and movement. Kind of like Moon Crystal as well, where there are certain areas involving platforming where you are required to like sprint from one side to the next, do a death-defying leap, only to catch with your fingertips the very edge of the platform, and then pull yourself up. And I think that's probably maybe the only fun moment in this game.
If this had
Yeah,
played
when
like
you do
Moon
it-
Crystal, that'd be amazing.
Right?
I think it would,
That would be
yeah.
something else.
Man, I was just thinking back at that forest level, the jungle level, and there's just like these little zaps in the ground, and you have to like double jump some of them. Oh my god, it was so painful.
Oh, you're referring to like the sort of death field. Like if you stepped into it, you would
Yeah.
be. Oh no, you're talking about the electrified floor
Yeah,
moments.
Yeah,
right?
electric
Yeah, yeah.
floor bubble or
Well,
whatever.
did you do a running jump to get across that, or did you do just a jump?
I think if you just move forward, jump, you do like a leap forward.
Yeah, that
I
leap
think.
forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't figure that out for a while.
Me
it was my
either,
second attempt playing. Yeah,
It's funny that you mentioned that because, yeah, I mean, so designed for a Genesis, presumably, I guess. Well, might have come out for the Amigo.
Yeah,
well,
Amiga
it was-
first.
Amiga controller
Amiga-
has how many buttons on it?
I don't know.
Yeah, I've
But
never owned
but I
one,
think
so
what
I
Brian
don't
was
know.
going to say, it actually was, I think it was designed and made for the Genesis, but then got made or released on the Amiga first.
exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah, I was going to say I was under the impression that it was designed for the Genesis.
Yeah, it is.
So going under that assumption, Sega Genesis first version of the controller, 3 buttons, right?
Yep.
ABC, and one of the buttons is an action button. One of the buttons draws your weapon, and one of the buttons is sprint.
Yeah,
Is that-
I guess.
is
I
that-
guess.
yeah. What a strange combination.
It's a
But
bad
it changes
layout.
up when you draw your gun. Then it changes up. So
Yeah, exactly. Right.
For-
Yeah. So you kind of have 2 different.
Right.
But I was when I was watching, I was trying to watch a couple of speed runs. Which, if you do watch a speed run, definitely watch the glitched one and not the glitchless one, because that's 2.5 hours difference. So, but they definitely go and change their controls right off the bat in the options menu. And I don't know what they change it to, but they definitely change it. So
Interesting.
yeah, might be button placement and just make it more, maybe, placement B might be a little bit more ergonomic or something.
Yeah. That's gonna be really
Interesting.
interested. Yeah. So the controls are a mess. The game, in sort of a classic gaming style, like does no hand holding
No.
as to the controls. I gotta hope that comic book that came with the game or instruction manual or something like explained. I didn't have access to either of those things, so I just kind of
Can
had
he at
to
least find a
figure
holocube
it
that
out.
explains how to play?
Right? It comes with each new copy comes with a holocube. So the action button, which is like an ugly relic of gaming past, like a button that just does a bunch of things.
Context sensitive.
Yeah.
Context sensitive and like not no on-screen prompt, like hit the action button to interact with this.
Yeah, there's a lot of like little things on the floor that you will obviously miss if you don't know exactly where they are, like credits and like cards.
Oh yeah, and things that are absolutely integral to moving forward in the game. And this game does nothing to show you where they are, and you kind of just have to. Yeah, I mean,
bash
I
action button everywhere.
Yeah, and well, it's not just the action button; it's also is it down in the action button?
Yeah,
to pick,
it is. I
Pick
think
it up.
so.
Man, that's insane to me. And then there's like forward in the action button to do the leap. And some of the platforming requires you to do the leap and not a moving leap or a running leap. Man,
I'm just glad that they did the smart thing and put infinite ammo and put the shield system, because otherwise this would have been impossible. Like,
and that's really the thing. Like when I think back to childhood playing this game, it was the look of that gun being fired. If I'm not mistaken, aren't there little like pixel shells that pop out of it?
Let me check. I'm actually just looking at a playthrough right now while we're talking, but
I will say, while you're looking at that, I'll just say that, we haven't talked about the gunplay much besides drawing the gun, but one thing that really frustrates me about this game and kind of keeps it from being more of a must play, it's just the it's a screen by screen game, so there's not really scrolling. It's kind of like, just like any of those most of those other puzzle platformers, but the fact that a lot of the times you just need to know what's on the next screen to react properly, because if you don't have, let's say if you're about to go to the next screen, you kind of, if you're playing it for the first time, you kind of have to just assume there's going to be an enemy and go ahead and draw your gun. But the thing is, I don't know, until the later levels, 7 times out of 10, there's not going to be an enemy there. So it's like, it kills any sense of momentum, and it's just punishing if you do get surprised, because if you don't have your gun drawn and you're not ready to fire right away, you're going to get knocked back and,
and then you can't take the time to go and unload your gun. And there's no, I was about to say there's no shells, but there's a very, very satisfying kickback on the gun.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking.
The animation is really cool.
Muzzle flare. It is. So like Joseph's saying, many times you'll get into the habit, and you're right, it is an absolute pace killer where you'll have a long straightaway. You've cleared out a room, or you've done whatever you need to do in a room, and you need to get from one side of the room to the other. You put your gun away. You sprint across to the other side of the room. Yeah. You pull your gun back out, and then you start doing that stupid inch forward into the next screen, and then you're liable to get shot anyhow. Assuming there is an enemy there, and if there's not, then
I walk into a room and I just start firing.
Right. Infinite bullets can do that. You just go.
Exactly.
Well, there's that other thing where you're this one area where you had the drop down, and there's 2 guys, and you had to count on them missing you. Sometimes the bullets just fly right through you and don't connect, and it's like what there's some, I don't know, unstated mechanic about they're always gonna miss the first time. Sometimes
there's also
an true action movie.
There's an integral move that they don't explain, but it's I think people refer to it as the stun drop maybe, or something, or just the drop, and it's where it's you can kind of you can literally get the drop on enemies if you drop down from a ledge with your gun drawn. Right. Then it's it's
you get first
a secret move.
That
you have to know to do well
in the jungle level. I remember, and this was not utilized very well. This was really cool, but they didn't really use this kind of thinking further on for their enemies. But you can drop yourself down halfway, then they see you, but then they shoot each other. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's kind of cool. You can kind of think it out. And there's another part you have to throw a rock to kind of make them turn around. So that kind of stuff is really cool, but they don't use it afterward. Once you start facing the cops, it's just guns blazing. You just
roll
have to,
left, roll right, roll left, roll right,
roll and shoot, shoot, and then I don't know, miss opportunities all over.
For sure. I will say that the experience becomes much different. I mean, I know you said you didn't get to finish it, so I have to assume you didn't get to the last stage.
No, I finished...
Morphed Planet or whatever.
Yeah, I got as far as delivering the package after you get your job license. And,
so you got pretty far.
I finished Death Tower, and then I was like, okay, I have no time. I'm out of time now.
Death Tower.
I love the concept of this story. I don't know if we can talk about it now.
Sure.
The whole story.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine.
So basically, you get amnesia. You figure out that you made this HoloLens that can see the aliens, and then it's your job. You put it onto yourself to go stop them, I guess. And then, so your friend gives you back your memories. He shoots a laser into your face, and then he's like, "All right, well, the only way to get off this planet is if you have enough credits to buy, you can get a free ride out if you win this tournament that is televised." So then you go and you get forged papers. You do all this job stuff to get the forged papers. You get onto this Death Tower, which is a very black level, and then with neon lights. And then you do it, you win, you go to another planet, but then you end up going to the alien planet. Is that it? Or you go to Earth first, and then you go
You
to
go
the
to
alien
Earth
planet?
teleport.
Yeah,
Like,
you
so before
teleport.
you go to the alien planet Morphs, you teleport there at the end
Okay.
of the Paradise Club level.
Okay, yeah,
So the Paradise Club level doubles as the alien dungeon, I guess, because at one point Conrad gets like captured and is inside the Paradise Club. Well, you make your way into the Paradise Club under your own volition. So you go through the Earth stage. The Earth stage ends and the Paradise Club stage beginning. You make your way through there. You get attacked. You start off in a jail cell and at the bottom of the Paradise Club, and you fight your way through. Probably one of the more interesting and more challenging areas in the game is like this Paradise Club dungeon area, and then you step into a teleporter that zaps you across the galaxy to Planet Morph.
because that area, I was just because I didn't play, but there's some enemies that like get invisible and run really fast.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
That's really
do
cool.
Like,
Like I don't know.
It's got like it's the game is not without merit, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely got a lot more things working against
Well, it's
it.
just
Yeah,
like it's like you were saying
absolutely.
earlier. You know how we were talking about how it mashes up all these ideas, but
Yeah.
it kind of would have benefited just from kind of focusing on one rather
sure.
than that.
Exactly.
Because if you look at this list of levels, you're like, man, that looks like a good 6-episode miniseries right there.
right, right,
know,
no, absolutely.
And,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, you know, they had this really cool hook, and I thought in the jungle level. And then, you know, even like if you took that into New Washington and maybe just kind of played around with what they gave you in New Washington for a lot of the game, because I thought that was kind of a more interesting aspect of the game, where it was like, even though it was a lot of fetch quest stuff and a lot of like errands, it was still, that was to me was the most cyberpunkish. area.
That's the
Oh,
only
absolutely.
cyberpunk.
It's even got a sort of a shadow run element to it, which
The public
you know,
transportation element.
Yeah.
the public the public transportation element, but the act of doing these sort of sketchy jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like you know, I don't know. I equate most cyberpunk things to Shadowrun, but you get a work permit. You have to. You're a documented person at that point, and you get these jobs like transporting people or picking something up and delivering it to someone else. But yeah, like you said, it's either an escort or a fetch quest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
would
neither
be
of which are-
a great fun tabletop mission.
yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, I really thought that, like, I don't know if we're talking about stuff that this game could have done, but I actually would have liked it. I think the game more if it was all that second level and you're like buying
Sure.
like upgrades.
Yeah, that's
rather
what I'm
than-
thinking of too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, flesh that
Yeah,
out and
yeah.
make it a.
But I think they must have went like, okay, we need to get some Alien because Alien is really popular, and you know, when did Aliens come out? Probably a couple of years before this.
if I had to take a guess here at the late 80s.
And so they're just like, okay, we need to get this out there. So we need the Aliens level, we need the Contra level, we need
that Contra level, Planet Morphs is. I mean, take a look at it. Even if you don't intend to play the game, it's super Contra-y.
Yeah.
It's it's very bio bubbles, like you know, viscera wall, like covered walls.
I watched what I didn't play. So
Yeah.
yeah, same. And sorry for the ending of the game. Spoilers, I guess, is that you blow up the planet.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you could have ever guessed that.
well, that's what you do when you leave any planet.
It's
I
true,
suppose,
right?
yeah. And
I can't
a
wait
very
to get off this one.
very Super Metroid-y kind of riding into the sunset.
Except he's
or
just
into-
like, I guess I could be floating out here for a while, you know, whatever. I'm just going to go to sleep.
But it's crazy how one guy can blow up a whole planet.
Yeah. Well, all it took was.
Atomic stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I guess since we're talking about the plot or whatever, so you get, I guess, like a stick of dynamite or something. It's something really like rudimentary in terms of explosions from a prisoner on the Morph planet.
Yeah.
And you fight your way to Mother Brain's central lair. So there's the Metroid aspect. You shoot this thing up, and it's an axillary Mother Brain. The main Mother Brain is too large and too expensive to make. I don't know, like whatever the reason was that they couldn't show you it, but it's implied that you toss, you basically put this charge onto an elevator, shoot the elevator down into the area where the main mother brain is, and then you get a sort of and also a Metroid-esque let's run from the explosion and get out of here.
Platforms falling and whatever.
Yeah. Lots of games did that, so I mean it's not but so this game, it's strange in that it attempts to tell a linear story, but it has these like it also wants to flirt with this like very gamey notion of having stages. Like, here is a stage, here's a passcode to get to the stage. But like that's not, I don't know why they felt the need to do that in such a jarring pace break.
Well, because they made the back. If we go by Frank's thesis, they made the back of the box first, and then they were like, okay,
the packaging was determined first, and then I don't know. I will say though, and there, from a sort of, I guess from a creative standpoint, I do like that each of the stages in the game has its own distinct look, and it's all. Like the color palette is interesting. Like New Washington doesn't look like Planet Titan, which doesn't look like the Death Tower. Earth is like very brown. Planet Morphs is very purple and pink. So it's as you move through the game, if nothing else, the game does a satisfying job of like changing the locations up. Which I mean, you kind of have to. I mean, I hate to kind of toss something that should be a given. At a game like this, but
this is
I thought that was kind of cool.
Game making 101.
Right. Yeah, everything needs to look different. So
but they do a good job at it. Like visually, it's a very good looking game. Like, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's just too bad it's not fun to move.
I don't know.
I'd say it's almost too good looking. Like, you can't really cleanly tell.
Yeah, I actually think it's kind of cluttered.
In
some ways, and I don't know. I'm kind of the opposite. I don't think this game looks very good, except there's one thing that I do think looks great, and I wish there were actually more of, are just those cutscenes, because every time they come on, I light up.
Yeah.
It's just something about the visuals are so attractive to me. Maybe just in my dino brain from that age, or that era of that rudimentary cinematic. It's so cool.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because this game was ported, much like Prince of Persia, to nearly everything. And there is a Sega CD version. There is Super Nintendo, the Genesis one that we all played it on. I want to say there are even a couple others. I mean, we mentioned the Amiga one. Several of those have cutscenes in them. And I'm talking like more involved, legit cutscenes. So maybe look up some YouTube videos to see if you can't find the other versions, because
are they in the same style, like almost like Star Fox looking?
Honestly, it's been so long since I've looked at anything about it. I can't rightly say.
That's here. That plus the music stings are kind of like one of the main attractions to me. And speaking of the music, I will say I was a little disappointed that these things come on, and sometimes the music comes on like randomly, like it won't. It won't. It's not like every exciting encounter has music to it, but some of them suddenly do, and like they're so short.
Go ahead.
I want to say they're so short that it sounds more like Conrad's cell phone went off in the middle of the game.
That's what I was going to mention. Like, you go into a room, there's a battle, there's like this weird prog rock song coming on, and you're like, yes, this is awesome. And then it 4 bars and it stops. It doesn't loop, and you're like, why?
Yeah, it's so strange to me. And the soundtrack composers, at least of the Genesis version, if I'm not mistaken, are fairly accomplished. The Jean.
Let's have Frank read those.
Please do.
Jean Boudleau, who did Eurovision songs, which is interesting, in '79, but he did Operation Wolf, Bad Dudes.
Ooh,
right,
nice.
Bad Dudes, right, nice. Future Wars, which I don't know what it is. Beach volleyball.
Classic. Wait, I'm thinking of the NES volleyball game. That's not beach volleyball, is it?
I don't know.
No.
That V-ball, right? Beach V-ball.
Oh, that was Super Spike V-ball.
Spike V-ball.
This one is an ocean game called Beach Volley.
Okay.
It's by Ocean France, which I don't know if it's a very good. Anyways, but he did Snow Bros.
Huh.
Okay, I like the arcade game. Right? Yeah. Huh.
Weird. And Flashback, and a couple of the earlier games, Cruise for a Corpse and Operation Stealth.
Let's take a step back. That's an excellent game title, right? Cruise for a Corpse.
Yeah, it looks, and the cover looks pretty badass too. It's like it's kind of like this who did it, like murder mystery looking thing. Anyways,
Man, I was picturing like this mix of like a I don't know, zombie game and Outrun or something.
no, it's like a rich guy on a boat. Let me try. It's like a kind of like
he's cruising for corpses.
I love it.
Like you know how you do when you're having a yacht party and like the prostitute does too much blow and then you kill her in the heat of passion.
Or it could have been like
you guys know how that goes. Right?
Like a homosexual necrophiliac game.
Oh, okay, cruising, right? Yeah, there's like leather chaps, but yeah. Right.
To be fair, it kind of looks like a James Bondy looking guy, and then there's a corpse hanging on the rotary of a boat, and there's a knife in his back. But in the rotary, it's a guy with a knife, and it's blue. It's kind of like a flashback. No pun intended. And then, so I don't know. It seems interesting, but I digress. The music could have been a lot better.
Well, it could have just been more. There's no reason, in a 16-bit system that there was just not just music all the time. Like, why would you not have music all the time?
I'm wondering if it's just limitations on the cartridge where they were using maybe too many colors, or I don't know.
Well, I thought some of it was
maybe there's cutscenes.
I thought some of it was just atmospheric. I thought they were trying to create an atmosphere with silence and stuff.
But chirps and stuff.
They could have put like other than like those little like bird sounds and stuff. Like they could have added like dun 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 dun, like some sort of little music in the background,
or just like something brooding. Like the whole game is brooding. So like, why not just like some low rumbly, like kind of like you would do with a movie, like string, like string swells and that kind of thing.
Out of This World had more, I think, atmospheric stuff, but like when the action hit, then it had its action music, which was
for sure,
which was good. Yeah.
If memory serves, with Out of This World, that felt more cinematic, than this one does.
It also had cinematic deaths, which this does not have.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's true.
It kind of had a little bit in the beginning.
That's true.
Well, this game only has the falling animation. Is that what you're talking about? And there's also the zap. If you get zapped by that
if you get burned
antimatter
up,
field,
if you get
it's
burned
got a few.
up, it's got a few, but it's like it kind of like drops off.
Yeah.
At that point. Well, I wanted to ask one thing. If I could, like, if you look at the wiki page and look at like how this was received at the time, it had massive accolades. Editor's Choice, EGM magazine, Editor's Choice for 3 consecutive months, Game Informer Game of the Year, Nintendo Power Best Show of Winter CES,
right?
Game Pro Action Adventure of the Year, etc., etc.
I guess that's why we're playing this, and we're not playing another one of these type of games, because this one is in our memories, because I guess it was well received.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm thinking of it because of the magazine coverage necessarily. I mean,
I'm just saying
Out of This World is on my list.
I'm just saying, like, this is popular in its day, and did it just not hold up, or like, who changed? Was it us?
That's always the question to me.
It's not us. It's the kids. The kids are wrong.
Right.
The kids are wrong. When we hit these games that just don't click, that were popular, I always just kind of got to wonder.
But to be fair,
I will point out, while we're on the topic of accolades, this is the best-selling French game of all time, for what that's worth. I mean, I don't know of a lot of.
Does that count all the new French? I mean, do they count like Assassin's Creed and like Rayman and stuff?
I don't know.
I kind of doubt it. I mean, like once you get into this modern era, like there are no
boundaries.
There's like mega corporations, right? Like, speaking of cyberpunk,
let me. I got the Wikipedia page here, and we were talking about all the platforms that it came out. Let me just list them off, because there is a lot of them. There's Amiga, the Acorn, the Mega Drive, the MS DOS, the PC-98, Super NES, Sega CD, FM Towns, 3DO, CDI. Mac OS, and then the remakes, iPhone, Symbian. I don't know what that is. Symbian was a model graphics system. Okay, some sort of OS. Dreamcast, and the Nintendo Switch.
So everything but TI-83s.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that's insane. Like that's a lot.
That is
it must have been popular. And I honestly, the question of like, what hasn't aged? Is it us or is it the game? It is. You have to think of some of these games in the context of the time, right? Like, I mean, when this came out, like the packaging, the promotion, the initial game experience, like the way it looked, the way it sounded. There just wasn't a lot of options when it came to that whole cinematic platform thing in '91 or whatever we were. What do you say? '91
or '92?
So
92,
I think it was just the right combination of things to get those sales up.
Well, also, if I had bought this game at the time and I didn't have any, I mean, I was a kind of a game hog. I was just like snorting them all up. So if I had this, then this was my game for the year, then I would have found it to be kind of a rich vein to tap into and like figure out and explore like a book or something, like just try and like unlock its secrets. But I wasn't that interested in unlocking its secrets this time around.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's tough to be too hard on some of these games because of that, where it's like, the world is our oyster in terms of retro gaming. We have an entire rich history of games at our disposal to pick from for this, for the sake of the show. So it's like, I think it's important, and I'm saying this as much for myself as I am for you guys, to keep in mind that when you're playing these games, and try to at the very least, like it breeds conversation amongst us when it's like, this game, I'm not having a ton of fun with it now, but I can see why it was interesting when it came out originally.
Especially cinematically speaking, that you can see how that was a big draw, and like how, just the technology behind it and everything.
Yeah.
Well, like this came out in '92, and like they were still releasing NES games in '92 that would, look so pale in comparison to this. You know what I mean?
That's true.
Yeah, and I'm looking up at they're releasing a 25th anniversary for the Switch, a remaster of the original game, but it's all using assets of the SNES version, which is interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah, so like the difference between the NES or SNES and the Genesis one, he has like a red shirt and stuff like that, which I see in the trailer. But also the collector's edition has a SNES metal tin to put the game in. It's like a cartridge. Yeah, weird.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Anyways, but yeah.
Well, I don't know. Do you guys have any other kind of closing thoughts before we sort of punctuate all this?
Nah.
All right, well, let's take a little break then. We'll come back with final thoughts. Okay, so we're back, and it's time to wrap this bad boy up. As we do, let's talk about maybe our favorite thing and our least favorite thing about this game, just briefly. And I'd like to hear a rating from each of you. So let's start with Brian.
Like it said, it was visually very interesting. I like the aesthetics of it. I don't know if I'm going to say too much more. On the downside, just the gameplay, it's so stiff. That's I think I really could have enjoyed this if the gameplay wasn't so stiff. But unfortunately not. So I'm just going to give it 2 unexplained mutants out of 5.
Okay. Frank, what do you got?
For me, I guess visually it was more appealing to me, and that's what always kind of brought me back to it. And like even though it's a mishmash of styles, I always think of like New Washington when I think back on it, and it does remind me of that cyberpunkiness, and it does appeal to me that way. However, the gameplay is absolutely atrocious, and the lack of music is horrendous. So I would definitely, I don't know, give it a 1 snickering little man shooting lasers in your eyes out of 5.
Brutal. All right. Joseph.
Flashback is occasionally great at crafting atmosphere, and the animations, they're primitive but charming. The cutscenes are fantastic at evoking a certain mood sometimes, and just like pretty. There's some nostalgia at play there. Those are my pros. Unfortunately, it's a little too awkward and dull for my tastes. Like the musical stings and brief tracks do their best to add spice to the dish, but I think overall they tried to do too much in one game with that already had kind of a rickety framework.
Right.
So I'm going to give Flashback 2 helpings of Cyber Hold the Punk out of 5.
Okay. All right. So that leaves me. I am glad that we played this game, despite not loving it, despite finding the experience. It's a bit on the long side, especially if you kind of pair it up with other platformers. I mean, the cinematic aspect kind of forces a certain slowdown to the experience in order to take in the atmosphere of the game. But ultimately, I'm glad that we played it. It was a game that I do have strange, fuzzy, fond memories of, and I was glad that I managed to make the time to kind of play it from front to back. As far as like the thing, the most successful aspect of the game, I definitely think it's the atmosphere. The sort of way that the game, takes you to these different locales, the way that the design of the stages kind of play off the color palette. It's definitely a look that is recognizable immediately. At least well, for me, or even for a new player, I think like you're not gonna come across anything that looks this way. And as far as the negatives go, like, boy, the controls are just a frustrating mess to deal with. And I mean, I think that there is no game that you should play where you get like 3 stages in before you really get a grasp of the controls. And I think that's mostly just due to like some of the strange contextual stuff. That said, though, I can definitely think of a couple of instances where like I sort of solved a very simple puzzle that this game offers, and the satisfaction I felt from going, oh, okay, I used the action button in just the right place, and like I did this, and I hopped back over on top of that, and so I mean, the puzzle part is not without fun, but it's overall it's just the mechanics that really keep this from being something fun to play. So I guess I'm going to rank this game 2.5 out of 5 cyberpunk amnesiacs. And there's a part of me that wishes I could get my own little amnesia over some of the parts of this game. But so nevertheless, that's that. So let's say that you want to get your hands on this game. Well, we mentioned the zillion and one ports, but we're focused today primarily on the Sega Genesis version. So if you are looking to obtain a copy of that, pricecharting.com, as always, has your general pricing for that. To get a loose cartridge of the Sega Genesis game, which I don't know why anybody would bother with a loose Sega Genesis cartridge, considering those clamshells were pretty indestructible.
Yeah.
And they're just awesome.
Should you find one? Yeah. Should you find one, $11.59 seems to be the average price for that. A complete in box will run you about $23.50, and a brand new copy in the shrink is about $50.
Wow.
So, yeah,
not
too bad.
Yeah, not a big seller.
Yeah, not a huge
we're going too
investment.
cheap now. We got to go back up.
Collector.
We're going way too cheap.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully our listeners get their hands on this episode and cause a price spike.
We're going to have to go through the list of game sales or new in box and then reinvert.
Yeah. Much like the way the French develop video games.
True story. Yeah, most people think it was Japan. No, it was actually the French.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I'm going to say it's time for
Doki Doki Power Line. Earthling, there's no way you'll make it all the way to the end of this one, so just give up now. Once we cart you in and toss you in the brig, or maybe off Death Tower, you can fire up your hollow cube and enter the following password to see the ending you could never hope to witness on your own. SANFRA.
Okay, so there you have it, the intercepted transmission from Planet Morphs. Thank you, Sanfra. All right, so it's time to announce the next game, and selection falls to Joseph.
Wow, it's my turn again.
Indeed.
This time I'm going to go with a little game called Mitsume ga Toru for Famicom.
All right, and that concludes episode 14 of Doki Doki Game Club. Before we take our remaining credits to the Paradise Club, I want to thank my amnesiac amigos for joining me today. Who are you guys, and where can people find you?
My name is Frank Martin. You can find me on Twitter at Hios_IO and on Twitch at Hios_.
And I'm Brian Grogan on Twitter at KenoShinobi, and check out my Dark Souls item description bot at item description.
My name is Joseph Luster. You can find me on Twitter at Moldilux, Moldilux, and my website is subhumanzoids.com, and should be getting a new episode of Subhuman Cast recorded soon, so like, subscribe, resubscribe, and like again.
And if Twitter is your thing and you'd like to follow me there personally, I am Genocide. That's DJINNOCIDE. And you can follow the show on Twitter at DokiDokiGC. In addition to that, we're practically on every other social network online as well. So search for Doki Doki Game Club all across the World Wide Web, or head over to DokiDokiGameClub.com for further details. And I'm going to go a little bit off script here and say that by the time this episode airs, there is very likely another Grogan in the world. And I'm going to do I'm going to say it. I'm going to go ahead and nail it down. It's going to happen. And so on behalf of everybody at Doki Doki Game Club, welcome to the world, baby Grogan. And Brian, congratulations on the birth of your son.
Congrats, the newest Brokey.
Number one fan.
Number one fan. All right. So once again, thank you to everyone who continues to tweet about us using hashtag DokiDokiGC or shares a link to the show on Facebook. You're the energy generator that keeps our shields at max power. And last but not least, we have a Patreon. So if you have a couple of bucks you can spare and would like to show us your support in that manner, you can head on over to patreon.com/Doki Doki Game Club, where we have some pretty neat rewards available to anyone interested in supporting us in that fashion. So on behalf of Brian, Frank, Joseph, Baby Brian, and myself, thanks for listening. And until next time, adios, Battletoads.